Hello everyone. Welcome all. I am Ahmet Ciftcioglu. I am doctoral student at Loyola University Chicago and fellow at Zahra Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to Zahra Institute's Fall 2025 speaker series. Before introducing today's speaker, let me mention the next talk in our series, which will be on October 1st. Dr. Salah Aziz will be speaking on Kurdish studies programs in the US in 1990s. Our speaker today is already known by many of you, Mucahit Bilici. He is professor of sociology at City University of New York and academic director at Zahra Institute. He has published work both in Turkish and English. Some of his publications include Hamal Kurt, Turkish Islam and Kurdish Question, Finding Mecca in America, How Islam is Becoming an American Religion. Last year, he published a book co-authored with Samuel Heilman, a comparative study of observant Jews and Muslims in America, following similar paths, what American Jews and Muslims can learn from one another. Professor Bilici is also columnist for Serbestiyet. Today, he will speak for about 30 minutes, after which he will take questions from audience. Thank you. Mamus Temujait, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Ahmet, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm going to talk about the need for a transition in Kurdish thinking that I deem necessary. Not thinking in terms of victimhood, but rather thinking in terms of ownership. Hence the title of my talk, Malik Kurd, Kurd the owner. I'm going to discuss Kurdish sovereignty in the contemporary context. So I must note I'm not a historian. My remarks are mostly conceptual and aimed at broader Kurdish thinking at a time of ambivalence and confusion. I am primarily speaking about the Turkish context of Kurdish identity, though it has relevance for the broader Kurdistan. To the extent that the other parts of the Kurdish lands look up to Bakur, the Turkish Kurdistan, the largest and gravitational center of Kurdish population, any collective imagination of a Kurdish future may choose to hear some of the points I will try to make here. My earlier book in Turkish, Hamal Kurt, Turkish Islam and the Kurdish Question, was a critique of the instrumentalization of Islam in the suppression of Kurdish rights. And it was aimed at universalist discourses that left the Kurds voiceless and Kurdishness unnecessary. Malik Kurd is a critique directed at Kurdish self-understanding and calls for a shift from victimhood to sovereignty and ownership. So I will begin by questioning victimhood and the notion of diaspora. Kurds have long been victimized at the hands of their imposed states, neighboring ethnicities, and Muslim brethren. There is no doubt that the Kurds are victims of oppression, exclusion, and state violence. But this also has created a sense of false purity, of irresponsibility among the Kurds. One casual, banal example is this. Many Kurds repeat the mantra that the Kurds can never be racist or oppressive. How could a group that can't even claim its own ethnicity be racist? They ask. The idea is that a people so oppressed and deprived cannot ever perpetrate oppression. Sounds familiar and sounds almost right, yet nothing can be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, the greatest racists were born out of victimhood discourse. Nazis and Zionists are the two examples of this phenomenon. If anything, it only cumulatively gets worse as the proud victim appropriates the violence of the oppressor and claims purity because of its own past victimhood. Even within the left, the idea of supporting the nationalism of the oppressed is a concession given to the appeal of victimhood. So victimhood as a discourse has corrosive effects on any society that is plagued by it. When appropriated by powerful currents such as nationalism, victimhood can turn dangerous. And I'm here not referring to the danger that nationalism poses for outsiders. Rather, it is dangerous for insiders. A prolonged addiction to victimhood or victimhood culture leads to lapses in judgment and political dependency. It is true that many Kurds do not have many options but to resort to victimhood as a form of self-articulation. They frequently find consolation in a nationalism that purifies and glorifies them. This may be an excuse, but it doesn't suffice as a political strategy. Of course, if you do choose to resort to this strategy, political actors steeped in Western Orientalism will soon celebrate you and promote your victimhood as a tool for projecting European civility against Muslim barbarism. For Western observers and enthusiasts, interest in Kurds is half pity, half vindication of prejudice. Clowns like Bernard-Henri Levy will use Kurdish or any other victimhood for their own self-promotion. Such moves on the part of outsiders and distant observers may sound harmless and even beneficial to the Kurds. Finally, somebody sees our plight, people might say. But in the long run, such instrumentalization of Kurdish suffering has only negative effects for the Kurds. The problems that stem from a victim mindset can be observed in the case of diasporas. Diasporas hardly ever benefit their home peoples, especially when it comes to politics. Their radicalism tends either to morally or practically wreck their homelands. For example, the Armenian diaspora brought war and destruction to Armenia. Rather than seeking an amicable resolution with its immediate neighbors and parties to the conflict, Armenia relied on distant powers and a reckless diaspora. The result has been loss and abandonment. Armenia is now facing the reality of its situatedness and recognizing the fact that one's true interlocutors are one's own neighbors, whether at peace or at war. Neither Russians nor Americans bothered to do much for them. They simply didn't care. Miscalculation and reliance on foreign support in military adventures can only end badly. Europeans would love to replicate a similar scenario for the Kurds. The typical Kurd in European imagination is a refugee. This is arguably a reflection of the empirical reality of the Kurds in Europe. The problem is the normalization of that image among the Kurds themselves. Displacement of the Kurds is more than a change of place. It is also a cause for disorientation. As figures like Arendt and McIntyre would say, all inquiry, all thinking is situated. This is a core hermeneutical principle. Kurds need to rethink their condition. The uniqueness of their context demands a fresh engagement that cannot be a copy-paste extension of other cases or a repetition of the past. Kurds need to rethink what is the right path forward. One of the strong currents among the Kurds who are in exile is typically nationalism. A major problem associated with nationalism is that it depersonalizes people. It depersonalizes people. Like other forms of mass culture, it takes away individual personality. Becoming a number in a mass mobilized by collective interest also means the loss of individual dignity. It, as it were, abolishes the moral responsibility of the individual. The unknown soldier can easily become the unknown criminal. The loss of individual dignity soon translates to vulnerability to manipulation through appeals to ethnic vanity. While Abdullah Öcalan is not a thinker, he's a smart political leader, and he sees what challenges the Kurds face. He recently, about 4 days ago, sent a letter to some annual Kurdish cultural festival in Europe. I think it was Dortmund, Germany. And in that letter, he asked the diaspora activists to think about returning and carrying out the work of democratic reconstruction in situ. He reportedly said, quote, "Under these conditions, our fundamental goal must be to wage this struggle on our own soil," unquote. Diaspora radicalism only undermines Kurdish legitimacy. I personally think that the people who stay in their homeland to pursue their struggle are entitled to err on the side of radicalism, but not those in the diaspora who do not face the consequences of their own radicalism. Okay, maybe I should repeat that sentence. I think the people who stay in their homeland to pursue their struggle are entitled to err on the side of radicalism, but not those in the diaspora who do not face the consequences of their own radicalism. Those consequences for the actual people in the homeland can be war and devastation. It won't be just an abstract performance of identity politics. The radicalism of diaspora activists, more often than not, serves their interests as individuals in the West, but not that of the Kurds in Kurdistan. A sincere nationalist or a true patriot, no matter the consequences, would stay in his homeland. His situated judgment would deserve respect regardless of its radicalism. But the same is not true for diaspora radicalism. Being on the land is important both as a form of holding one's ground and a claim to legitimacy. So one might ask, what is the best scenario for the Kurds? Well, to work with their immediate neighbors and real interlocutors. Any reliance on the US or Israel will only bring regret and suffering to the Kurds. Many not so smart people want to think that this statement is because of some anti-Americanism or Islamism or whatnot. But the fact is that this is simply a brute fact of international politics. America is not a reliable partner for anybody, Kurdish or not. Wishful thinking won't replace America's own record and professed policies. America acts not on sympathy or human rights, but on self-interest. America will use the Kurds as a bargaining chip and then sell them back to Turkey. Israel, if anything, would do worse. Hence, Kurds should engage in a situated reflection about their well-being and not be swayed by formulaic liberation prescriptions recycled by popular nationalism. They should also not overestimate their strength and the power of the so-called international community. I think we would all agree that the Kurdish case demands proper historicization and original thinking. It's a unique case in many ways. Unfortunately, blind appropriations of academic fads, such as post-colonial theory, prevent many scholars from seeing the specificity of the Kurdish case. Is it really appropriate to treat the relationship between the Turks and Kurds as one of the colonizer and the colonized? It can perhaps be justified as a legitimate protest or a sympathetic metaphor hurled at the Turks, but does it really stand intellectual scrutiny? I will offer a couple of reasons why the colonial analogy is a mistaken lens when approaching Kurdish-Turkish relations. First of all, in a colonizer-colonized relationship, the colonized is always recognized as the other. The colonized never has a problem of recognition. It is typically a problem of otherhood, alterity, inferiority, inequality. Otherness is ineradicable. Whereas in the Kurdish case, I'm speaking mostly about the Kurds in Turkey, the problem, first and foremost, is recognition. The shortest formulation of Kurdish problem in the Turkish context is lack of recognition. It is not exclusion, but involuntary inclusion. It's assimilation based on non-recognition. And thus, recognition can solve most, if not all, Kurdish problems. That is not the case in colonial contexts. Secondly, a colonizer-colonized relationship is always across a distance. The colonizer is an outsider, a stranger. He settles and exploits. The relationship is primarily an economic one with a fee added for the travel, the cost of the travel. You come all the way from Europe to India, for example. The Kurdish-Turkish entanglement was never a colonial encounter. Neither side came across the other in a context that can be distantly called colonial. There is no, or not enough, distance between the Kurds and the Turks to allow the colonial analogy to make sense. Of course, much in the same way that nationalists love to extend the beginning of their national history into the depths of prehistory, some academics also want to hammer every instance of oppression they come across with the hammer of colonialism. I would argue that for all that the Turkish-Kurdish relationship is painful, oppressive, and needs serious attention, it is not a colonial relationship. And I believe dignified Kurds may even consider it an insult to frame their quarrel with the Turks as a colonial relationship. They would consider themselves engaged in a fight with a treacherous partner rather than with a colonial master. Thirdly, although the Kemalist era of secular Turkish nationalism did everything it could to erase Kurdish presence at the founding of the modern nation and later constitution of the new state, Kurds were and are part of the new republic. It is not wise for the Kurds to accept the hijacking of a state that at least partly belongs to them. Now, imagine that you and your business partner co-signed on an SUV. Would you let him co-opt it for his exclusive use? Or would you confront him to reclaim the vehicle and reassert your right of ownership? As long as you can retake the ownership of the car, it wouldn't be wise to settle for a bicycle. I hope my analogy works. Bicycle part is at least funny. Kurds are not simply a category of people who are victims of the Turkish state. Kurds are not simply a category of people who are victims of the Turkish state. In that regard, they are unlike Greeks or Armenians. They have the historical constitutive rights and contemporary democratic powers to reclaim the ownership of the republic. The republic was originally established as a Muslim republic co-owned by the Turks and the Kurds, per the 1921 constitution. Here too, the Kurdish specificity comes to the fore. Kurds are not like Armenians or Alevis or Yazidis, categories of victim minorities the academics love to study and frequently invite the Kurds to mold themselves into. Reduction of the Kurds to some generic victim category does no good to the Kurds. Furthermore, Kurdish demographic power and political leverage within Turkey is far greater than any combination of military power and distant alliances outside the immediate Kurdish context could bring. Now, without a proper appreciation of the specificity, indeed uniqueness of the Kurdish case, Kurds will continue to be invited to act in ways that are incongruent with their own reality. That also means they will fail to pursue what is best for their well-being. Kurds should seek ownership, Malikiyet, and claim an existing sovereignty that is theirs rather than putting themselves against a major military power that will crush and permanently damage their historical and political capital. Not to mention a civil war within Turkey that will only be catastrophic for both the Kurds and the Turks. It is in this respect that Öcalan is indeed ahead of the populist agitators, for whom the performative identity is more important than the fate of the Kurdish people. PKK was a paradox of violence and lofty ideals. After the laying down of arms and self-annulment of the PKK, the nonviolent vision of a democratic society provides a new start for Kurdish society. Their voluntary disarmament also resolved the paradox that had defined the PKK, carrying out armed struggle and having abstract demands such as democracy. The question is whether PKK's military credit will be converted into political progress. The futures of the four parts of Kurdistan are increasingly becoming more interdependent. Therefore, any thinking about one part has to consider the whole. Although some parts of Kurdish lands, certainly Bashur and Rojava, have relative autonomy for now, their features still remain dependent on the trajectory of Bakur and Turkey's position with respect to them. In other words, even though the other parts might appear to be ahead of Bakur, their future still depends on Bakur and Turkey. That is why discussing Kurdish-Turkish relations is another way of discussing the future of the Kurds as a whole. The current deal, for example, between Öcalan and the Turkish state is dependent on the trajectory of Rojava, and the future of Rojava is dependent on that deal. Sometimes in relation to the current peace process, whatever it is called in Turkey, some Kurds ask the question, but how can we trust the government or Turkish state? And this question, in my opinion, reflects the pathology of the victimhood mindset. If it is a matter of trusting the government, the Kurdish actors should know that they will fail. Not because the government is untrustworthy, though it very well may be, but because if you, as a party to the peace process, remain mentally a spectator to the process, hoping to receive goodies at the end, you will not get them. You have to claim and own the process. Skepticism and skittishness don't serve the Kurdish interest. If the peace process is ever to succeed, it will only be by Kurds becoming active claimants of ownership of the state, rather than passive recipients waiting for the delivery of their rights. Hence, the Kurdish liberation should be sought in the achievement of sovereignty. And sovereignty should be sought from within rather than from without. So sovereignty should be sought from within rather than from without. There are historical, demographic, and political reasons for this. The alternative path is the path of armed conflict, and it is unlikely to succeed. If PKK's record is a clue, the chances of success are even dimmer today, both for PKK and SDF. If the Kurds aim for sovereignty in the form of independence without separation, as I will explain in a minute, they will be able to offer to their interlocutors, in this case the Turks, a win-win scenario. And it is the Kurdish interest that dictates this path. So what options do Kurds face when it comes to the question of sovereignty? Okay. There are several options. I will talk about three. Let us start with the PKK or Öcalan. PKK's approach to sovereignty, it typically focuses on equality and is typically either uninterested in or wary of the notion of sovereignty. Ignoring its more pragmatic oscillations, it seems to me that the PKK seeks a republican equality in a common state, a state which they hope will disappear in a stateless future for the whole world. Due to his egalitarian communalism and anti-state theoretical orientations, Öcalan's conception of equality ignores the question of sovereignty, or simply leaves sovereignty to the mercy of the historical moment with the hope that eventually the state will wither away. In this conception, liberty will ultimately make sovereignty unnecessary in a true democratic society. We can consider this approach a form of equality without separation. Öcalan's formula for offering the Kurds equality and ownership is to force the currently Turkish state into a democracy where ethnicities will become irrelevant and thus the Kurds are equal. Most nationalists, on the other hand, that's the second perspective, they are not interested in equality. They are not even interested in a particular regime type. They simply want independence through separation. And they think independence is achievable only through separation. As a matter of fact, they cannot conceive of independence outside the framework of separatism. They are less interested in liberty or equality and more interested in the abstract symbols and nominalism of having a state named after their nation. What I have been offering personally is a third way that transcends both of these contemporary approaches, and that is independence without separation. The emphasis is less on equality, which is formally easy to achieve, but on ownership. The emphasis is on ownership. Malikiyet. Kurds need to gain independence, but to achieve this, they don't need separation. I know this is hard to digest, so I will say it again. It is possible for the Kurds of Turkey to become independent without necessarily separating from the existing state. They simply need to reclaim their shareholder status in the ownership of the state. They need to reclaim their shareholder status in the ownership of the state. This is the more peaceful and productive path, least harmful to the Kurds of Bakur and more empowering to all of the Kurds. Asserting the rights of Kurds within Turkey, not simply minority rights, but their rights as equal stakeholders in governance is much easier and more reasonable than trying to break one of the most powerful countries in the world. My position can be described as the defense of Kurdish dignity without subscription to nationalism. For what Kurds need is not nationalism but dignity. Particularly for the Kurds in Turkey, and by extension, the other Kurds. The path to salvation is not a rote and rootless nationalism, but a situated, grounded Kurdish dignity. Nationalism is likely to bring calamity to the Kurds and their neighbors. Even legitimate anger is no justification for taking the less reasonable path, which in this case is one of war and displacement. We are at a time when nationalist sentiment is rising among the Kurds. People who have been deprived for so long of recognition, today have a thirst for being seen and being recognized. Any such gesture, near or far, finds widespread resonance. In such moments, it's also natural that demagogues within and opportunity-seeking actors without will inject a heightened sense of confidence and push the Kurds towards militarism and miscalculation. I will stop here and will be happy to take your questions. Thank you for your patience. All right.
Thank you, Professor Bilici, for this great talk. Now we can take questions if you have. Okay, Esma Güneş has a question. Some people refer to the policy of incorporating Kurdish emirates into the central state during that Ottoman Empire as an internal colonialism. What is the error in this argument?
Ottoman Empire was one could say pre-economic, a non-economic empire. And colonialism is primarily an economically motivated type of relationship. In terms of Ottoman Empire and Kurdish Emirates relationship, it is more an administrative arrangement than a colonial relationship. It is not like that the Kurds were an independent state with their own institutions and systems all in place, and then Ottoman Empire comes from a kind of distance, comes and takes the economic resources away. It's mostly a relationship of autonomy that the Kurdish Emirates were enjoying. Later centralization is a modern effort, but it's nation state is kicking in even within the empire, centralization and political centralization. It's still not economic, and so to call it colonial relationship is really to stretch the definition of colonialism, and I think it doesn't help the Kurds. It's not a dignified relationship. It helps the victimhood discourse, of course, and it fits perfectly into the academic literature. You can say, hey, look, we are also colonized. But, does it help the Kurds? No. Academics don't have to worry about whether it helps the Kurds or not. They are worried about whether it fits the theory or not. And so, no, I don't think it counts as colonialism. You can call Ottomans brutal, dictatorship, sultanates, sultanism, and so on, but it's not a colonial relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
I was expecting more questions than one. Okay,
Yeah.
there is another one.
We have next question. Kurds are by Çeto Özel. Kurds are not recognized in the Turkish constitution. So how can Kurds claim ownership of the Turkish state given the fact that the name of Kurds was abolished until recently?
It's true. That's a great question. It's not nominally recognized, but factually, Kurds are present. And if you look at the trends in terms of Kurdish society's progress in demographics, levels of education, urbanization, and so on, Kurdish reality is going to, and it is imposing itself. And so Kurds can work with the past assumptions of, oh, we were excluded, we are not recognized, we are victim, and assume that, the future is going to be like that. Or they can choose the option of looking at their new reality and say, hey, well, look, we are crowded. We are not a minority. No one can beat Kurds. You can't continue your government. We are one of the three actors in the Turkish politics. So if you are smart enough sharing, once Kurdish politics achieve this level of pragmatism, sophistication, and I think PKK's disarmament is a good step in that direction, Kurdish political power is going to multiply within the Turkish system. And it will eventually become a constitutional crisis, not recognizing Kurds. So once that happens, Kurds, both in practice and nominally, will become shareholders of Turkish state. So it's not so much whether the documents have the name or not, and it's certainly the Turkish state's intention thus far, maybe even today, is to avoid, to eliminate, to minimize, to prevent such eventuality. Despite all these factors, my trust is not in the documents or Turkish side, but the Kurdish reality imposing it. And so this internal growth, development, transformation towards claiming the ownership of the state is something that Kurdish politics needs to catch up with. And certainly all the academics and commentators who are, mostly living on the victimhood, they should also catch up with that. And if we care about the benefit of the Kurds, their well-being, without conflict, without suffering, what is the best path for achievement of recognition, equality, and sovereignty, not just equality? I think this is the best path. And so this is my reading of, the situation.
Thank you for answer. Our next question. Currently, we don't have any question, but we can wait.
Sure. I should have provoked more people, folks. Okay.
Okay, our next question is by Sebastian Chwaski. In your third path, independence without separation from nation state of Turkey, would Kurd be more loyal to the Kurdish nation or the Turkish state?
All right. So in independence without separation, which, as I said, it's hard to understand, but independence means you become really independent. You are not afraid to hang out with people. You are not their slaves. You are freely together, and like we are here. And so the fact that you have been captured before or enslaved or coerced might instill in you fear of hanging around with other people. But you can't act on that fear. You have to overcome it. That's a trauma. And that's what I'm suggesting. Kurds need to overcome victimhood mentality and switch to ownership and sovereignty. Now, within Turkey, are Kurds going to be loyal to Turkish people, Turkish nation? No. Kurds are going to be, and they should insist on this, they will be the co-owners of the state. All citizens will be equal. If someone is recognized, Kurds are going to be recognized. To the extent that Kurds have local needs, those should be addressed. Kurds and Turks will consider themselves one people, one nation. It's possible. You might say, okay, what is the closest example? But in Europe, it didn't work. Maybe Turkish-Kurdish relationship is closer than European relationship. It's much closer. They are angry at each other, yeah. Sometimes family members, siblings fight terribly, bitterly. But Turkish-Kurdish relationship can have its own unique historical expression, its unique outcomes. Therefore, Kurdish dignity uplifts Kurds and do not let Kurds fall prey to the bitterness and hatred that nationalism inculcates in people. But the Kurdish dignity is very important. And you might think, what dignity? We live in mass society and so on. But, mass society alienation we are experiencing and all that, the cure to that is not, more nationalism where some leader will hijack your emotions, manipulate you and so on, but to empower every individual to have dignity. And so Kurdish political history, as a matter of fact, and this is partly an artifact of lack of a central or strong big state. It has been defined by dignity. Kurds, even when they were minority or if they were defeated, they were dignified. And I think this can be a Kurdish cultural trait and a contribution to the future of the world. We uphold dignity as the highest value for every individual and for every collectivity. I hope this answers your question. So, loyalty will be, I'm not loyal to anybody. We are free. Liberty means you are not subdued to anybody else. As a matter of fact, there was a third definition of liberty in the past that disappeared, and it was liberty as independence. But with the arrival of mass culture and so on, then we had the other two definitions. But I will stop here because there's another question. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for answer. Mustafa Durmaz has a question.
Hi, this is Connie. I'm sitting with Mustafa.
Sure.
So I heard some of it, the baby was crying, so I came in and out. But I heard you say that it is the responsibility of the people living on the land that they can be a little bit more radical than the people in the diaspora in terms of fighting. What about the people in the diaspora? You say to kind of integrate when you're on the land, should people be proud or, forthcoming saying, I'm from Turkey, I'm from Iraq, what's their identity? Or do they say, I'm from Kurdistan? What's their role in this incorporation?
Thank you, Connie. Connie recently had a baby, so thank you for joining the talk and for your question. I didn't say that people on the land, in the homeland should be more radical. I said if they end up being radical, their radicalism is excusable compared to those in the diaspora because they face the consequences, the gravity of their actions, the consequences are visible to them. So they have in a better position to make judgment. They might err. So it was more in that direction that, sometimes the situation requires a specific answer that is not in the prescriptions. That's why, from afar, any form of radicalism, you can make suggestions, but if you are encouraging people to get into war and conflict, that requires responsibility. It's a moral matter. That's why. Otherwise, obviously, everybody's free to generate ideas and so on. As to the second question, whether people should be proud, yeah, I mean, Kurds anywhere and everywhere should be proud to be Kurds and pursue their individual and collective well-being in any state they find themselves. If in a state they have autonomy, celebrate that autonomy, increase it, improve it, refine it. If you can be shareholder of a state, that's even better. Be shareholder of the state. Kurds should never, nowhere feel and see themselves as subordinate to another people. This is their, I guess, natural right, or at least the call of history for them. The idea of liberty requires that. As Americans, I think we can say that. So, yeah. But affiliation happening to be Iraqi or Turkish or Syrian at the individual level is another historical artifact. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Mirhat, you can go for a question.
Thank you, Master, for your presentation. My question is actually a bit complex because this takes me back to, obviously, you said that the Republic of Turkey and the Kurds are the establishers of the Republic, and claiming the dignity as well at the same time. There is obviously a prominent figure in the Kurdish history, Said Kurdi, who also vastly attempted many times in Istanbul to claim the Kurdish dignity in the era of establishing Republic of Turkey, and unfortunately was tried. You could say that, I don't know, maybe he was unsuccessful or not. I'm not sure about that, but after the establishment, I think he went silent in terms of, but we know that he has tried more than multiple times to keep the dignity of Kurdish people. So my question would be, obviously experience shows that it is less, shall not say less likely, but the theory,
It's okay.
yeah, theory is there, obviously, but in practice, how to what extent this is can be put forward into reality is the issue, I guess, here.
Okay.
As there is a previous example, I think, which is a big example, I think. I mean, I read made a little research, and I read a book about how the events following to the Republic of Turkey. So my question would be, what would be in practice? I mean, obviously you also mentioned that the Western, how they perceive the Kurdish identity, not just the European civility, but obviously based on political basis, they keep mentioning for example, or they have protected us against, ISIS, and keep saying ISIS as if that's the only thing. But yeah, I mean, if it almost feels like the Kurds have been left in the middle, somewhere between, and as it's always been, so they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
So how to get out of? I mean, it sounds like it's a very long journey, not like tomorrow's thing. What's your perspective on that? My question.
Yeah, thank you. I got your question very well. Thank you for articulating it. I would say what has changed, let's say, since the early years of the Republic? Well, Kurdish society is much more educated. We have a modern demography, and that makes a lot of difference. Turkey has more or less democratic institutions. You can say they are terribly undermined, being dismantled, true. But relatively speaking, compared to many other neighboring countries, it is a workable space. Whether you work through certain clientele relationship or democratic processes, electoral processes, still there is ways, paths for Kurds to exercise power, to uh, to claim the state. That it failed in the past or didn't materialize, you can explain by a lot of factors. But some people might say, well, it didn't work, so it can't be, it shouldn't be tried again. What if it is the right thing to do still? A lot of people are inclined to say, our forefathers, they were stupid. Why did they not want this? There was the opportunity. Why didn't they take it? Well, if you think you are smarter than them, well, actually you are wrong. They were also well-informed people. They used their judgment. Okay. So it's a matter of approaching the situation with fresh judgment. And what is good for Kurds and for humanity, but really we are talking about the well-being of Kurds. And with that consideration, looking at this picture, this is what comes out as the result in my own analysis of the situation. A lot of people will go for the cheesy and cheap, um, way of, framing it or perceiving it as, okay, this is some religious thing or whatever. But there is nothing about religion or this or that in my analysis. It's about what is the path of least suffering and maximum gain for Kurds. All right. So you can collaborate with this state or that state, calculate what you will get, what you are going to put your people, what condition you're going to put in them. Do you want Kurds to be in a protracted proxy war zone, Kurds being destroyed? When PKK made the stupid choice of turning Kurdish towns into a conflict zone, people found it wrong. Well, you want to do the whole Kurdistan turned into some proxy war zone where Kurds will be um, attacked everywhere, destroy the whole Kurdish population. If you are a smart person, you would know what is the right thing to do. If you can get inside attack, you don't stand in front of it. That's what reasonable analysis of Kurdish politics says, and I think this is visible, but it sounds hard to accept for the sentimentality of Kurdish woundedness. So that's why I had to start my conversation about the pathologies of victimhood, because that victim mindset prevents Kurds from clearly seeing and judging what is best for them. There is another question. I want to quickly switch to that. Okay. Maybe I will read it, Ahmet. Thank you. From Çeto Özel, thanks, but I guess you are taking the current Kurdish reality into account. Kurds have suffered tremendously to reach this point. When we think about the 20s or even 1980s, would you still have the same perspective concerning Kurds to claim ownership of the state? If so, how realistic would it be? It would be less realistic, yeah. It would be less realistic, for sure, yeah. So my current analysis reflects current situation, my reading of the trends and the past. The past is relevant, but past is not our dictator. Past is not going to limit our imagination. It can inform it. It's an input. That's why, yeah, we are in a kind of new situation. For example, in the past, other parts of Kurdistan were not so much part of the analysis of Turkish Kurds experience, and that's why it is it's a new situation. There was another question. My apologies. Forgot it. All right, Mohammed Erim, is there any signs of Turkey as a country to truly accept and allow Kurds to be equals? If yes, what are those signs? Also, what really Turkey wants? I think that's what's gonna make or break us from each other. Yeah, that's the question everybody is trying to answer. But Turkey is now facing a totally new situation, similarly the way Kurds are facing a situation. It is no longer only a domestic problem. If you make a mistake with respect to Kurds in one part, it's gonna have reverberations, serious consequences in other parts. That's why, that's why four parts of Kurdistan are now much more attached to each other and dependent on each other in terms of their future. And so you can't make a mistake. And that's why Rojava, as much as you want Rojava to be in this or that way, you cannot think of Rojava as a standalone place, you know. It would be great if it is like this. No, it's Rojava and Turkey, Rojava and Bakur and Bashur, it's much more interconnected. You might say, Iranian Kurdistan is slightly different because of the nature of the states. But yeah, I see Turkey facing a more serious challenge in terms of handling this problem, and it's no longer a problem reality. So both from externally from outside as an international matter, cross-border matter, and also domestically with the Kurdish population. So it's no longer a matter of suppression. It's not possible. It will turn into a civil war, and that's bad for Turks and bad for Kurds. If you are just angry at Turks and want to harm them, you can do that, but you're gonna destroy yourself in the process. So I would say that. Thank you. All right. A few other quick questions. Do you think the Kurdish language will survive, or how much of it, until Kurds obtain their ownership? Yeah, Kurdish language already survives. Kurdish language has been saved by not so much the number of people speaking Kurdish might be diminishing, but Kurdish literature is alive, vibrant. There are enough people speaking Kurdish. Yeah, there isn't a problem of Kurdish language being lost. It's really a nationalist cry. Yeah, you wish more people speak Kurdish, children, yeah, you can do this. These are irrelevant stuff, in my opinion. There is no danger of loss of Kurdish language. You want more people to speak it, you need to have state institutional support for it. That's why owning the state is very important. All right, next question, Esma, saying, can we say the Kurdish nationalists who hate the Turks because of what the Turkish has done throughout history, that they should take into account that Turkey is a NATO country and that many of the harsh military policies implemented during the Cold War were done with the authorization of the United States? Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, or at least, implicit consent. But, I find it irrelevant. The past is pretty much irrelevant. You can feel, you can question, you can ask Turks in terms of accountability and so on. These are secondary issues. The present of the Kurds, the reality of this, existing reality, its freshness requires steps that I describe, which is Kurds should claim the ownership of the state. They shouldn't just watch and wait. So, all right. Ahmed Erim's question, and I think we can conclude after that. Wouldn't be better for us to think both paths and plan accordingly? Can we truly trust Turks and allow them to gain superpower in the Middle East? Why not we think about ourselves? Okay. All right. So here is the thing. Even if you work against Turks, Turks are gonna still be semi-superpower. So that means you will still be beaten badly. And as I said in my talk, if you are hoping some other guys from afar are going to help you and give you Kurdistan, that's a mistake. That's not gonna happen. It won't happen. So what is the wise thing? You will lose, Turkey will lose, somebody else will gain. And then ultimately you will be an object of exchange between other party and Turkey. And since you are whoever is close, whoever is local, that's your interlocutor. So United States, Israel, this type of actors will pursue their interests. They will do things, but they will never let you be superpower, as they don't let Turkey to be superpower. And they will sell you the moment Turkey offers a better price than you do. If you are smart, you won't be beaten, and you would be stronger with Turks. Whether you like them, hate them, it's irrelevant. Irrelevant. So far you have been fighting. Now something else is facing. Or you will be torn. Both of you are gonna die, so you will first try to save yourself. It is this plain, this simple reality as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, but Kurds should, of course, struggle. I mean, if you are expecting Turks to do something for you, they will never do it. You have to take it. You have to claim it. And we have something in common with Turks. We can use it against them in the sense of, well, shame on you, you are Muslim, right? Turks were using Islam to deny Kurds. Now Kurds should use Islam to force Turks to accept their partnership and ownership. This is the strategy that will help Kurds and prevent suffering for anybody. We don't want Kurds and Kurdistan becoming a war zone. And I think that's the baseline. Thank you. All right. So I think that's all for today. I want to thank you all. And thank you, Ahmet, for hosting. Our next event is Ahmet. Dr. Salah was here. Yeah, he's still here.
Yeah, our next talk will be in October 1st. Dr. Salah Aziz will be speaking on Kurdish studies programs in United States in 1990s. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dem Rojbash Khatribe Shabash.